Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment of Health Professional Radio. We're going to be speaking with Shriya Swaminathan. She's joining us here as Science Policy Advisor at PETA to talk about the U.S. Navy's current use of sheep for decompression sickness, illness, experiments, and talk about why they're not necessary. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Shriya. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, of course, I did mention that you're Science Policy Advisor at PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Tell us a little bit about yourself and talk briefly about being in that position.
Yes. So I come from a science background. I have a master's degree in Biology and Biomedical Sciences from Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. And my interest was to focus on developmental, regenerative, and stem cell biology with the ultimate passion for investigating more human relevant methods to replace the use of animals in biomedical research. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to translate my skills to work towards this ultimate goal of replacing the use of animals to not only save countless animals' lives, but also to provide treatments for people who are unfortunately misguided in the faith that animal experiments are somehow going to yield any beneficial outcomes as far as human health goes. And so as Science Policy Advisor at PETA, I do work with various organizations, from public organizations to private organizations, all geared towards replacing the use of animals and changing policy in that front.
Now, I must admit that I've heard of animals being utilized for many types of experiments, both medical and cosmetic, but I am shocked to find out that decompression sickness is one of those areas where animals are used. What is decompression sickness?
Yes, so decompression sickness is a very painful condition that is experienced by deep-sea divers when they rise quickly from high pressures underwater to lower pressures at the surface. And it's also called the bends. So essentially it happens when bubbles of nitrogen gas form in the blood, muscles, and other organs, and this can cause excruciating pain and even death. And in this scenario, the United States Navy is willfully torturing sheep and other animals by forcing them to endure this pain in worthless experiments that waste our taxpayer dollars. And the matter of the fact here is that the treatment for bends has not changed for over 80 years. And yet the Navy is still needlessly subjecting these animals to horrific pain, leading them to die in this pain, while naval members who are susceptible to the bends are missing out on effective treatments for this painful and sometimes lethal condition.
Okay, now I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around the fact that we know what the bends causes. We know why it's caused. We know the treatment. Why continue to experiment with something that we're intimately aware of?
Right. And here I understand that there is always a lot to be learned as far as advancing treatments go. But when we are using animals time and time again, as has been happening for the past 80 years, and expecting a different outcome, that defies logic. And the Naval Medical Research Center themselves have publicly admitted that their experiments on animals do not accurately translate to humans. There are advanced animal-free technologies like studies in human cells, human clinical trials, analyses of human data, diver data, that have already provided researchers with relevant information that would better help study decompression sickness, predict symptoms, assess risk that would more likely translate to something more relevant and help our naval officers. There are successful navies like France and Britain that have already scrapped these archaic animal testing programs in favor of these advanced animal-free methods. So there really is no reason for the U.S. Navy to continue to torture and kill animals in these useless experiments that, again, waste our taxpayer money.
You mentioned that there hasn't been a change in treatment for the bends in over 80 years. Are the treatments uniform worldwide in these successful navies, as you mentioned?
Right, because essentially understanding how divers are experiencing these symptoms when they are rising up to higher surfaces is going to be something that would be better gauged if they are looking at these human relevant data, as I had addressed earlier, these human clinical trials, human cell studies. And if the United States Navy would embrace these technological advancements of our time, not only will they be providing more reliable and relevant treatments to their members, but they also have a great opportunity to set a precedent to other navies across the world.
Are we the only Navy currently using sheep for these experiments? Or are there still others that are engaged in it as well, even though some of those successful navies that you mentioned have stopped it?
The use of animals, unfortunately, is a pretty ubiquitous issue among various research programs across the globe. But given the power and the recognition that the United States Navy has, they have the ability to inspire other navies that still do use animals in these experiments to follow suit, to embrace technological advancements, and to embrace the future of human-based, human-relevant science.
What is PETA doing about this issue other than getting the word out that it exists?
Yes. So PETA is leading the charge to end these horrific tests on animals and is demanding that the United States Navy put an end to their animal testing program for decompression sickness for good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it's not just PETA and other animal rights groups who are calling for this. The former commander of the Naval Medical Research Center, Rear Admiral Marion Balsam, joined PETA in calling on the current Secretary of the Navy to end these worthless, wasteful experiments on animals that are also depriving naval members of life-saving treatments for this painful condition. We have also escalated this critical issue to the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, urging him to intervene and put an end to these archaic tests immediately. In fact, PETA supporters also protested at the 2022 Defense Conference last week, where the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro, was speaking and made their voices heard, calling on the Navy to end their agonizing decompression sickness experiments on animals. So for the good of the patients, for the advancements of science, and of course, to save the lives of countless animals, we are going to continue to press top military leadership to ban these barbaric experiments on animals once and for all. And supporters can join us by visiting PETA.org/Navy. It's made it incredibly easy for listeners and supporters to take action and to directly contact these top military brass, urging them to do the right thing and end these wasteful decompression tests on animals once and for all.
Shriya, I appreciate you joining us here on Health Professional Radio. Thank you so much for giving us this information and this insight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Shriya Swaminathan. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at Anchor, Spotify, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.